Hello, my name is Chris Campbell.
And I'm Dana Harvey.
And welcome back to Metro Jazz. We're broadcasting from the atrium at the Southfield Town Center complex, and we have a wonderful show in store for you.
That's right, Chris. We get to rub elbows with jazz legend George Goldsmith in our artist profile piece, and Ed Love in our feature segment, along with checking out a legendary jazz ensemble at Baker's Keyboard Lounge.
But first, we'll get into our artist profile piece and turn it over to Dana.
Noted drummer George Goldsmith was recently honored at the legendary Baker's Keyboard Lounge establishment. The event was put together to honor George's influence, longevity, and accomplishments in the jazz world. Let's take you there. Many years of practice and passion go into crafting the music that legendary jazz is made of. The music itself is as varied and vibrant as is the instruments it's composed of. And the drums, the heartbeat of jazz, is what legendary jazz drummer George Goldsmith is made of.
I didn't choose to play music. The music chose me. And I don't have anything to do with the fact that I play. It was just a natural thing that I was always gifted, I guess, to hear the music and to be able to react to it musically. As far as wanting to be a musician, I didn't have any choice in the matter. I just did it. Drums was an instrument that I was gifted to play. But John Coltrane was really one of my major influences. You know, he kind of adopted me. And I was fortunate also to have not only been born at a time where I received the rays that emanated from the bebop era, but also from the avant-garde, the more free-type jazz era. So I was right in the middle of it. I got all of it. And I'm really thankful for it because I think it really made me a better musician. I've always been told that I had a natural knack for teaching. As long as nobody put any guidelines of theirs before me, told me how I had to teach, I could teach. Every student, I feel like I can teach any student how to play drums, you know. And so far, it's been working. And as a result, I started to teach at the University of Michigan, here at Mars, which has a very unique learning center. And it seems as though all of the parents here really enjoy what the feedback they're getting from their kids as to how I'm teaching them. So most of the students that I've taught have went on to do great things. Ali Jackson, who is now with Wynton Marsalis, he's one of my kids. Kareem Riggins, who's now with Ella Fitzgerald's ex-husband, the great Ray Brown. So all of my students have went on to do really great things. I see them quite often when they come and they tell me they're still following in my footsteps. So I think the main thing for a teacher to do is, the object is to make the student as good or better than him. See, but between you and I try to stay a step ahead of yeah.
The sound of jazz transcends differences of age, culture, and language all over the world. And the history of Detroit jazz plays into that evolution. Tonight at Baker's Keyboard Lounge, we honor one of Detroit's innovational and inspirational jazz artists. Fellow supporters, fans, fanatics, and other artists support George Goldsmith, master jazz drummer.
I'm playing for my friend George Goldsmith, who's a drummer, well-renowned jazz drummer. And he's had some misfortune medically, and so what the jazz community has done is come together to do a little benefit for him, as we always try to do for musicians, especially the jazz community. And we're raising some money for him, try to help him with his medical bills, and I'll play some music. George and I go back about 35 years. We played a lot of jobs. I just think he's a very quiet type person. I think you know what, some people prefer to let their music speak for him. And George, he doesn't say much, he just plays. And I think that's the kind of guy he really is. He just lets the music speak for him. And what few jokes he do say, I'm even trying to figure out what the hell I shouldn't say that word. But he's just a very introverted type guy. Very quiet, reserved, But he's a hell of a drummer, though, and I respect him for it.
You know, he's an inspiration to the younger jazz musicians, and you know, he's a great performer, and you know, he encourages you, you know, to be the best musician that you can be. And I've worked with him quite a bit, and it's always a learning experience. So, you know, it's unfortunate right now that he can't really play at the moment, you know, but I'm sure he'll be back. He's that type of person.
Very well. What have you learned from George Goldsmith? Many pride him on his education and what he's been able to impart to young jazz enthusiasts. What have you learned?
Well, it's musical things, phrasing, you know how to swing, you know that aspect of the music, and you know, to be a professional. You know.
Very well. What do you think his legacy will be years from now when young cats think on the name George Goldsmith?
Great jazz drummer, inspirational, and just a professional's professional.
When in the jazz community, when people need help, when we rise to the occasion, hopefully. And we're here now because George has had some medical problems, and we want to make sure that he's able to cover that spot. Plus, he's our friend, and we want to do anything for our friend. At this time, we want to bring up some of our guests, and I don't want nobody to get away.
I've been fortunate to play with George in several different genres, from the usual jazz, like we do here at Baker's, to the sacred, because that's also something that I do. And I've been very blessed to have been able to hire him to do those kinds of gigs with me too. And it's always wonderful because he's very sensitive, and he listens, and he is very supportive of your music, and that's what you want. That's what you need as a vocalist. You really need people to listen and to respond, and he's just really a master at that. You know, he's just really, you can't get any better. I feel like this is family, and when family is in need, you just come on out and you do your thing, because we love each other. This is a song that I've loved for many years, and probably you have too. So I'm going to do this because love is what it's all about.
What do you feel his legacy will be when people think about him and reflect on him 10, 20, 30 years from now?
That he's very, very knowledgeable. As I said before, very supportive, knows what he's doing. And that's really important. You don't want somebody just banging around making noise. He really knows what he's doing at all times. And that's something that young guys can emulate, and that's something that vocalists are always looking for. So George is not just a legend, he's a gem. There's a wonderful personality to go along with it. That's really important too. You know, he's easy to get along with, and he's just a nice guy. That really counts.
Where over the rainbow sighs of
he knows the art of a swing. He knows how to swing. He knows how to compliment singers, other musicians. He's a listener. His style would be swing. Every famous musician or musician strives to swing, and that's the art, and very few achieve that. Very few achieve that.
How is it that Mr. Goldsmith made you feel comfortable? How did he create that comfort level with you when you performed with him?
Well, you know, there's a saying that the drummer is the one that carries the group. they set it up. And Mr. Goldsmith, that particular evening, set everything up. The rhythm, the melodicness, the melody, because actually he was playing what I was singing. And so if I stopped I sang the form down, and if I would stop, he would play it from the top. And of course I could hear exactly where he was, because actually he was playing, singing it. So he made me feel very comfortable, very serene, because I knew it was like he was like a cloud, if I may say, and I was like floating on the cloud. And so it was like lots of cushion, and I was right there, and I couldn't fall through. I knew that he had my back, so to speak.
George, he happened to be home, and he came to Baker's on an evening when we were doing an open mic session. I listened to George. George is an outstanding drummer. He was interested in bringing in his own group, and from the first gig that he had here, his show was very outstanding, well received, and from that date on, we had George in here regularly on a monthly basis. And he was the headliner. He had one of the great shows that we had here for a long time, for a year and a half now. I think what George brings to the show is he's a swinger. George is a very good band leader. He knows his chords. George is a straight-ahead drummer. He maintains the jazz, real jazz, the pure jazz sound, and that's what's great in this club, the straight-ahead drummer.
Well, George was a member of a select cadre of Detroit musicians, which included Paul Chambers, so many, Harold McKinney, Marcus Belgraves, Yusuf Lateef, Earl Van Dyke, J.C. Hurd. These are like the stellar names of Detroit musicians who went on and became national artists. In fact, when I first met George Goldsmith, or he doesn't even remember, I tell him the story many times, but he had just gotten a job with John Coltrane. He had just been selected to be John Coltrane's drummer, and I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I was working with Dorothy Ashby, who was the great Detroit jazz harpist. So that is when I first met Mr. Goldsmith. I've known him now going on 30, maybe 33 years. That's how long I've known him. And worked with him. I've had a chance to work with his great group, Endangered Species. I've learned a great deal from him, and as I have all of the great musicians in Detroit, we have a great tradition here. And George is instrumental, one of the instrumental people in that great Detroit tradition. I played everything with George, from private parties to hotel jobs, what we call hole in the walls, or nightclubs that no one even goes to visit unless they're well prepared. I worked just about every venue that I could imagine with him, you know, in town and out of town. I always am extremely grateful to George because he was one of the older musicians who was willing to give me a chance when I was still, I had been working around, but I was in college, and he, along with people like Roy Brooks, the great drummer, Harold McKinney, Earl Van Riper, they knew that I was in school and that I would need money, and they would call me occasionally just to give me a job so that I'd have some money while I was up in Ann Arbor going to school. One of my special memories with George is we were playing an outdoor concert, and at that time it was like an all-star band. I think James Carter was in the band, I was in the band, Jerry Allen was in the band. It was one of the most musical experiences that I can relate. We just had, it was one of those days where the alpha waves were just, everybody's alpha waves were great, and George was just, you know, it's like sweat was just rolling off of everybody, but everything we played, we couldn't play anything wrong. It was great, and I remember when the job was over, we all just stood around and looked at each other. We didn't even have anything else to say. You know, that's one of my greatest memories of George Goldsmith, one of my amongst many. Well, first off, he's inspired me to be a good man or to try to be that. And that's most important. If you're not trying to be an adult, whether you're male or female, then regardless of your accomplishments, as far as I'm concerned, you're that much lesser. So he's inspired me in that respect in order to be able to face life, face challenges, deal with it, good or bad, up or down, win, lose, or draw. His musicianship, his camaraderie, his graciousness, and his humanity towards human being, towards people, his love for people, things like that are what inspire me, and George has that in abundance.
We hope you enjoyed the interviews and performance footage from the George Goldsmith tribute. Be sure to catch other thoughts from George in future Metro Jazz episodes.
Now, Metro Jazz doesn't just stop there. We happen to be in the business of keeping up with jazz legends. Our feature piece looks at jazz broadcast icon Ed Love. Now, Ed's been in radio for over 40 years and is a fixture in the jazz world. His knowledge and passion for jazz music has garnered much praise from artists and listeners alike. We caught up with Ed to get his reflections on Metro Detroit's jazz scene and his illustrious broadcasting career.
In my home in Kansas, they built a new radio station in my neighborhood. And a friend of mine said, "Hey man," said, "those guys really, they dress sharp." And he said, "They got pretty girls." He says, "Let's start hanging around the radio station." I was coming out of college, you know, right just about, and still with nothing to do, you know. So he says, "Why don't you go with me? Let's go down there." So we started hanging around this radio station, excuse me, hanging around this radio station, getting the disc jockeys records for him. And he did a request show. Then he'd have a request, and we got so good at it, and he got so lazy that he didn't do anything but sit in the chair. And we went running back to the library getting the records for him. And I asked him, I said, "How did you become a broadcaster?" So he said, "I went to radio broadcast school, TV and radio." And I said, where'd you go? He said, "Well, they have one down on 12th and Oak right here in Kansas City. Why don't you go?" So I went down, you know, I went down there. I found out how much money it would take. Hit on my father for the amount of money. And he said, "No, if you want it, you get it." So I went and I started working on the railroad, saving my money up. And then I went to broadcast school. You have to go through so much stuff in broadcasting if you really want it, you see. And I mean, I went through a lot, like working in New York, coming here to recuperate because I had relatives here, going back to New York to find out that my job was no longer, that somebody was sitting in the chair, you know. And so they shot me down. It was a chain of stations. They shot me down to Baltimore. And that's where I came from when I came here 40-some years ago.
Now, question, the format, your first job in radio, was it jazz?
No, it was not. It was just pop music. Just play anything that came to you, anything but jazz. You know, my first 2 or 3 jobs were like that. I played more Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., and then later it became rock, Bill Haley and the Comets, Elvis Presley. I interviewed Elvis Presley one time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did a program called Man on the Street, and they brought him to the thing. He was appearing in the town, and he had a reputation in the city. He was there for about a week of going out with any kind of women, including, you know, and I say including black because we're talking 50s, early 50s, and that was something, you know. So I asked him, I said, Elvis, among other questions, I asked him, I said, Elvis, I said, what kind of women do you like men to go out with? And he knew that I was trying to get him, you know. So he looked at me and he had me and he smiled. He said, female women, so female women, and he just smiled. You know, he knew what I was trying to do, so I just stopped it right there. You know, I couldn't go any further.
Now, charting your path to WDET, you've been here with the station for how long?
About 20 years.
20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've been called in many circles an icon of jazz, legend of jazz, Detroit's jazz spokesman, elder statesman. What got you into jazz? I mean, what is this something, a genre of music that you always felt?
My mother, yeah, she was a singer, and so she had a tremendous interest in music. And I say music now, I didn't say jazz, but music of all kinds. And including in her appreciation for music was a lot of jazz. And I knew that to be true because she had a tremendous record collection. At that time, the only thing, these things didn't exist, nor did the LPs. It was 78, the breakable things, and she had, like, she would run an account. You know how people run an account at the grocery store? She was so crazy about music, she ran an account at 2 record stores. Every week she went out and she paid something on it. Yeah. But she always brought back 2 or 3 records, you know, real good ones. Of all kinds, Stan Kenton, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, I can just name them all. Right into Dizzy, right at the time that I'm talking about, Dizzy and Charlie Parker and those people were just like, I don't know, they weren't there as of yet. But I did hear one of the first Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker records because my mother got it. Now, what would make her, you know, being the type of singer that she was a friend of Billie Holiday's. Billie used to come to the house a lot because she and my mother were friends.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, I don't think my mother had those bad habits, though. I don't believe that. But she did know Billie, you know.
What kind of person was Billie? I mean, we've seen the movies, Lady Sings the Blues and all that. Did you have any interaction with her?
I used to sit on her lap when she was talking to my mother, you know, but I don't know what kind of woman she was. I don't know anything about it except she was just a big, pretty woman to me, you know, when I was a little kid looking up at her, you know. But she came to the house quite often, you know, when she would be in town, you know, with the Basie band, and then later on her own, she used to come there. But my mother had this big collection. I mean, just not everything. And I never heard her mention blues, jazz. I never heard her say the words. Now, she might have said blues once or twice that I can remember, but never did I hear her say anything about jazz. Matter of fact, I would venture to say that my mother didn't even know that there was jazz. She just liked music, good or bad. You know.
So it's like music with no labels that you're kind of exposed to.
Right.
Okay.
And my mother used to listen to music up in the front of the house. And I don't know if you remember or not, or you've seen it, but there used to be screened-in back porches where you could live. Some people had a little okay. Back there was my father's den. You know, I guess that would be the den now. And he just stayed back there. And every Saturday night, he used to listen to a Nashville, Tennessee station, WSM, that carried the Grand Ole Opry, you know. And he was crazy about, well, he's from Kansas, you know, he's crazy about country and Western music. So I got my blues and jazz from my mother, her record collection, and her singing to me from time to time. And I got my country and Western appreciation, which I have from listening to the music with my father on Saturday nights back in his den. So.
Is that right? Okay, so you got a best of both worlds almost in a way.
Oh yeah, man. There's some swinging country and Western stuff out there. Oh yeah. Back there in that part of the Midwest. Yeah. And sometimes I'm listening to the guy that does bluegrass here now. And I hear some of the swinging stuff that I used to listen to. Some of these people are quite old. And Robert Jones, his blues show, he's talking and playing some of these people that my mother had in a record collection. And I talk to him a lot about it.
Brings back good memories, huh?
Yeah. I tell him all about, you know.
What was the jazz scene like as far as clubs, groups that gigged up here? What was it like back then?
I thought it was flourishing. Now, I don't mean monetarily, because I don't know how much money was to be made, but I know I went out every night to a different jazz club. There was one over on 12th and Pingree. It was called Klein's because the guy who owned it was named Klein, just like Baker's, you know, after the owner, named after the owner. It later became Club 12 when it changed ownership. But I saw every great jazz personality that there was in Detroit, almost, to see just by sitting there at Klein's. But
now, have you seen any acts that have gone on, like that started off in Detroit and have gone on to just blow up?
I got here just at the time that they had this exodus from Detroit to New York with Tommy Flanagan, Barry Harris, Donald Byrd. It's all of them just before they left.
Now, it's been said that you're partial to jazz singers. Do you think your mom, being a songstress, had something to do with that?
No, I don't really think so. I've heard that too. And that usually comes from people in the jazz community who are criticizing what happens here, you know. And then there was 1 year that I was the programmer. Like now I'm a program consultant for the Jazz Festival, but in 2000 was when they were going through a change, and I was the programmer for the festival. And I called it The Songbirds Are Coming, which intentionally I had a lot of female vocalists on there. You still get it, but I'm not going to have, say, be prejudiced towards singers if the records are good. I still play them. But no, I mean, if I had my, you know, if I could choose what I wanted, it would be instrumental music all the time. There are times when that, but I know that we have an audience. I know by this thing here that there are a lot of people, male and female, who like vocalists, male or female. So I'm not going to discriminate against them because, hey, I'm jazz and all that. My show, my jazz show, not only here, but in other towns, you know, when I started playing jazz, has succeeded because I do play vocals. I don't try to show people what jazz is.
That will just about do it for us. If you want to become a part of the Metro Jazz movement, feel free to contact the station at 354-5348 and ask for a newsletter. Be sure to leave your name and contact information, and someone will get back to you.
And remember, Metro Jazz is music and life. Metro Jazz is you.
See you next time.